This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, NIL Game Changers, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And the opening half hour of the show brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. They'll take care of all your insurance needs, and at the same time, they will make sure that they save you money. Customer service means everything to them. At Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury, go to purdyinsurance.com. And, of course, in the Sunbury Motors studio, Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury, Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Great to be joined in the opening half hour by one of my personal favorites, and that is Sweeny Murti. How have you been, Sweeny? Doing well?
Jonesy, you know what? You just reminded me of something listening to all that. Pardon me for the tangent right now. A couple of weeks ago, I took the family and I went on a vacation to Universal, and I rode a bunch of roller coasters with my 10-year-old son, Ryan. Wasn't the most favorite thing I've ever done, but I did it and I survived, right? I told my mom, and she said and I reminded her, we never did this when I was a kid. We go to the parks like this. She says, "Oh no, the only time I've ever been on a roller coaster was before you were born." And my dad worked at Bucknell for a couple of years before moving to Penn State Harrisburg, and so they lived in Lewisburg. And she told me that she racked her brain to remember where this roller coaster was. It was in Sunbury. Now, I have no idea how big or small this, whatever amusement park or fair or whatever was in town, but as I keep hearing you say Sunbury all the time, I'm reminded of the story she told me just a couple of weeks ago that she rode a roller coaster in Sunbury.
Well, Knoebels would be the closest still
okay.
Here in Elysburg, which is just outside of Sunbury. So
I'll take your word for it.
Maybe it was Knoebels.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing extremely well, and I hope you're doing well. Doing great work as usual.
Thank you kindly.
John Sterling, I mean, somebody will have to explain to me why now and not spring training. But I know he's tired. But, how surprised were you that it was now? I don't mean this year, but now.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, but I guess it's not, it's not always so cut and dried. I think, for a lot of times you have athletes or whatever go through this, and, their body tells them at the end of the year that it's finally time to go, or they see the prospects of coming back with a contract or whatever it is. And John could be there as long as he wants to be, and I'm not sure he really knew that he didn't want to be. So until recently. So he's done an amazingly long time. I think all of us would sign up for longevity and everything else that's gone with his career. And I hope he has plenty of years left to enjoy himself and his family.
What made John off the air special and then on the air special?
I think kind of both of the same to some degree, Jonesy, is because he loved rooting for the Yankees to win, and he was disgusted with them when they played poorly and lost. Mm-hmm. So it was like you're sitting next to somebody or listening. As if you're listening at home, it's like you're sitting next to somebody who's there with you and is interested in the same thing you are. There was something very genuine about that with John. It wasn't contrived. Definitely very excited. And I could see, what I could see up close for 9 seasons. I got to do post-game radio shows, And that meant going to the booth in the ninth inning and sitting next to John as the game was ending. Mm-hmm. And in these, unless it's a blowout, you have the game on the line situation here, one way or the other. Are they going to hold on? Are they going to come back? And you could feel those big moments as the crowd is rising and the situation gets there. John was ready for it, and it was theater to him, and he loved it. As much as he was into the idea of watching and rooting along, he also knew his responsibility as a broadcaster and was ready for that moment. I can still picture him sitting back in his chair, letting the crowd do its thing as as a 3-2 pitch is coming, or about to be thrown, and he leans in just as he sees the pitcher set, and you can see him it's almost like he's stepping into the batter's box, so he is ready for the pitch, and he was still very good at those moments. And it's a funny thing too, I mentioned this to somebody a couple days ago. You would appreciate this. He doesn't use a headset microphone. He uses a stand microphone. This is a little inside radio, but whatever.
Right. By the way, that's Don Fisher of Indiana. Don is going into his 52nd season. Same thing. Don does not use a headset. Okay. Now it's very for the I think you probably stand up a lot while you do games, right? Move around a little bit. Usually I'd say 80% of the time I'm sitting down, but 20% of the time I'll stand up.
Okay. So there are moments when you stand up and it's easier to move around with the headset on. And, most broadcasters these days will use a headset. It allows you, frees up your hands to write or move around and things like that. And John still uses that stand microphone with an earpiece in just one ear. And what he's still able to do is lean into that microphone like he's crouching into a batting stance. And our engineer, remarked to me once that John has amazing mic technique, and as the crowd is rising up around him, he knows how to get right through and make sure his voice is cutting through, and still able to be heard above the crowd in loud moments and bring his voice up. And listen, I've had troubles with my voice, and I know what I can and can't do in a loud room, in a loud environment after 3 hours. Let alone after 3 hours, and he's there night after night doing this and bringing this big booming voice still in his 80s and matching the moment many times, and that's what I appreciate. And off the air, he's he comes back down after a game a little bit, and it's on to the next, but he still feels it as a fan. And, I think he really, truly enjoys the theatrical aspect of it. And I think that's what people have to remember. For critics of his style, I think you have to remember that he knows he is entertaining. He's not just telling you what's happening.
Well, this is what people do need to understand. You don't broadcast for the critics. You broadcast for the fans.
Correct.
You're trying to paint pictures for the fans. You're trying to tell stories for the fans. Right? You're not broadcasting to the critics, and there's an excellent chance that the critic can't do what you do. So what does it matter what they think?
And honestly, probably trying to find faults here and there, because that's what draws the attention.
Right, exactly. So where to from here? I mean, the Yankee situation better than anybody. I mean, I know they've had people that were scheduled to fill in for him. Is that how they're going to do it? Is there a permanent possibility? I want you to get it, but I'll leave that at that.
I haven't asked. I'm actually removed from it now. I've been away from the radio for over a year now, over at Major League Baseball, and I can speculate as to what I think might happen is that they'll there are a lot of and. Just my own pure speculation here, Steve. Let's make that clear. If you're going to search for the next person permanently, you could pick one of the two guys who have filled in this year, the last 2 years when John's missed games, and Justin Shackle and Emmanuel Barberi. But if you are the New York Yankees, do you want to find someone who has a little bit more name value, experience, whatever you want to call it? I don't know. But if that's the case, then you probably have to wait till the off season to name somebody more permanent because, any of the people who you might be thinking of in that regard are probably already under contract announcing games this season and aren't going to be leaving those jobs. That's just a guess for me. I don't really know what's happening there. Said I'm removed from it now and, on to other things.
All right. So now I want to ask you about what the Yankees have done to this point. They salvaged against Toronto, and I know Aaron Judge got a lot of credit for coming up with a big hit, but it seems like Giancarlo Stanton to this point is off to the kind of start the Yankees needed. How important is that component to go with Judge and Juan Soto?
The finish will be a lot more important than the start. And how many times have we chuckled at the line in spring training, best shape of his life, and you hear all those things. Those are great stories for spring, and I was as guilty as anybody of pushing those forward when I covered spring trainings all those years. But what you come to recognize is that they should feel great in spring training because they haven't played games for months.
Right.
Everything is a controlled environment. Even the exhibition games, you're only playing 2-3 innings to start, and then 5 or 6 innings to start. You rarely play back-to-back days. You should feel good. Now is when the grind begins, and you're playing 8 in a row and 12 out of 13 or something like that. And you get these stretches where the team's going to play 17 days in a row, and you're finding off days, and people get banged up here and there. You ratchet up the intensity level. That's the thing. If Giancarlo Stanton can stay in the lineup for 120 games, I would sign up for that in a heartbeat. I would take that number from here to the end of his contract. You don't need to give me 150 games. You give me 120 and assume that other people are healthy and producing as well. I think those numbers will look good because if he's playing that many games, Steve, it probably means, that you found your areas to rest him, maybe a small injury, but you found your areas to rest him and make sure that you get everybody else in, and he's performed. Those numbers are going to be there if he's in the lineup that many times. So I do think there's something to his, I haven't seen it up close yet, but like whatever they're describing as more of a slimmer, trim, toned version of Stanton, but he's still such a big body, and those are unusual bodies for baseball, so to keep them healthy over the course of the running and the pounding of a full season, that's the tricky part. And I don't know how many of us can relate because, it's just different putting that body through that sport and that regimen every day.
So you brought up the injury part, and so far there have been a rash of injuries, especially for pitchers to this point, which some people have said is pitch clock related. You've seen it to this point. These things do go in cycles for whatever reason. What's your thought on that?
I think the pitch clock thing is ridiculous.
I do too.
To mention that. If it was the pitch clock, then, every pitcher would be getting hurt, right? Everybody. And as many big names as you've seen, it's not there. And this is not something new. We've seen this over the last few years. And I think it's pretty clear that the guys who are throwing super hard are the ones who are getting hurt. And it's hard to pull back on that because you've been taught now that velocity is what gets you noticed, velocity is what gets you drafted, velocity is what gets you promoted, and velocity is what gets you in a big league uniform. So it's hard to pull back on that. And even just bringing back to Giancarlo Stanton for a minute, the idea that it takes a while for players to learn, for athletes to learn, train less, and it'll be more beneficial to you. I heard Don Mattingly say that that he learned way too late that maybe he should have pulled back a little bit on the amount of work that he did, focusing more on the quality of the work, and maybe his back would have held up because he's almost positive that that's what happened to him in the early 1990s when he hurt his back, and he wasn't quite the same player that he was before that. So along those lines, velocity and just keep pushing the limit is how these athletes are training now. I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a pitching coach, but Steve, I mean, we can draw this line, right? Like, you keep running your car 130 miles an hour, pretty soon you're on your way to the mechanic.
Yeah. No, and this is in doing football and basketball, when football gets to November, practices get shorter. When basketball gets to February, practices get shorter because legs become exponentially more of a premium at that point. And you can, practice makes perfect. Perfect practice, okay, is what gives you the best chance, okay? And if you're smart about how you practice and build in the right amount of rest, you actually are going to be a better player.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that people struggle with, especially at a young age when you feel invincible at times, right? I mean, these guys act and perform as if they are invincible, and who can blame them? I can't relate. I don't know how many of us can to being that good at a particular sport that takes you to that level.
That's right.
So I see some of that, but and I don't know where. I don't know how you can fix it, because there aren't enough people willing to say, I'm going to pull back now, right? I mean, it's the idea of work hard, outwork somebody, and it's taken on the meaning of pushing your body too far sometimes, as opposed to, training well enough to do it.
Well, there's a pressure of it, because there are this is how good they are. Okay, this is both how good they are and how important it is to stay in it. There are 8 billion people in the world. 780 of them are on Major League Baseball rosters. That's how good you are, but also how important it is to keep your spot. And that's why I think some guys try to work themselves into the ground, because they know how valuable the spot is.
Yeah, and listen, and everything, all the numbers, line up to tell you that it's harder to hit velocity. Yeah. And from a hitter's standpoint, you're searching for perfect exit velocity, because that equals harder hit balls equal more hits. And so we're pushing the limits. I don't know what this solution is. I really don't. But you had guys who threw hard before. You had guys who worked quickly before. I think the idea of making them work faster, I think, is a silly reason to point at, because that's, and I see why they say that, because if you saw the way the game was being played and drawn out before the pitch clock was introduced, you had pitchers literally taking as long as they could to catch all their strength and gear up to throw the next pitch as hard as they could, and then take another deep breath and work their body up so they can throw the next pitch as hard as they could. Yeah. And that's why the game slowed down.
Oh, there was one Red Sox reliever who came in 36 seconds between pitches. Hey, the concession stand is only open until so long, so you just can't keep running back and forth. All right, Sweeny, you are the best, my friend. So great to have you with us, and look forward to talking again.
Steve, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Anytime. The great Sweeny Murti joining us on the show today. This half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
When car repairs get difficult.
Well, I just don't know.
Me neither.
We get good. Sunbury Motors. More than quality new and used cars, Sunbury Motors specializes in complicated auto repair diagnosis. They can handle intricate repairs and even complete auto body with service open Monday through Friday, 7 till 4. And Sunbury Motors has made simple repairs easy. Maintaining your vehicle is necessary. Finding the time to do it is difficult. Welcome to Sunbury Motors Quick Lane. Just walk in or call ahead. Relax in their remodeled waiting room with Wi-Fi, beverages, and snacks. Will Sunbury Motors factory trained techs take care of your oil change, tire alignments, brakes, and inspections. Quick Lane, 6:30 to 6 Monday through Friday, Saturday 6:30 till 2. Sunbury Motors, Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury. And Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. We take the out of auto repair.
You want a unique way to display your brand. You need a team of seasoned experts to work with. You want to reach customers who buy. You want NIL Game Changers, a versatile consulting agency powered by former student athletes and coaches who work as NIL sports agents. NIL Game Changers will help you build powerful relationships with customers through compelling stories, with student athlete influencers as your leading edge. Finally, we'll equip you with the right media to drive your success home. NILGameChangers.org, building meaningful relationships with your customers.
Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour brought to you by NIL Game Changers, your ultimate destination for name, image, and likeness. Whether you're an athlete, business, they can help you. It is all at NILGameChangers.org. There you go. Okay, so we have what, Tim Kirchin coming up?
Yep, 206.
206. And technology is officially coming to college football because they passed. We told you that the 18th would be the day that they would end up passing this stuff, and they did on both helmet communication and on the 2-minute warning. Okay. And that was important. Everybody knew it was going to happen. I mean, everybody knew it was going to happen. But so let's start with the 2-minute warning, which is going to change a lot of strategy out there. It's a strategy that you are used to as a fan. As a fan, you are used to it for the reason that you watch the NFL games all the time. And because of that, you'll be able to get a real feel for it. Now, it's for anybody who says, "Oh, great, another timeout." No, and I explained this, by the way, at the quarterback club. I said no, the fourth timeout of the second quarter and the fourth timeout of the fourth quarter will be the 2-minute warning. You already have 4 to begin with. You have 4 timeouts to begin with. Okay? Now, you go from there. So since you have 4 to begin with, this is just the 4th timeout. What this will help with will be something as simple as, remember that drive a couple of years ago where Penn State went down the field against Indiana on a 17-play, 9-minute drive? Well, when you're on a 17-play, 9-minute drive, well, guess what doesn't happen if there are no timeouts? There are no TV commercials. And then you score the touchdown, they go and then play a TV commercial. And then you kick off, and guess what they do after the kickoff? They play another TV commercial. I was like, what the heck's going on? Because there weren't any stoppages. This will guarantee a stoppage for them to take care of a TV commercial. So the 2-minute warning, like the NFL, is in. Fans are used to that because you watch a lot of NFL football. Okay. So that's that. And that is what they're going to, and that's going to be in. As for helmet communication, that is also in. Helmet communication is now also in. They were already working with it. Penn State was practicing with it during the spring. So, they're getting used to it. Andy Koltanicki calling in the plays to either Bo or Drew. And that's what, they, so they're used to it. Same thing with Tom Allen and whomever the middle linebacker happened to be at the time, whether it was Kobe King or Tyler Elsdon. They're the ones that will have the green dot. The communication will automatically turn off with 15 seconds to go on the play clock, or as James says, theoretically. And he's right about that. Theoretically, it's supposed to. We'll find out if it actually does. But, in the NFL, it does. That's how it works. It's supposed to work the same way here. Now, the next part, and this will be a little bit different than the NFL, the use of tablets. Okay, the use of tablets. Okay, so let's get to that. Because the use of tablets is going to be critical in this. The NFL only allows you to do still pictures, which is so archaic. Like, what are we doing here? I mean, high school teams have video. Well, they're going to be able to use video in college. And the questions in the blue-white game, they used 16 tablets in the blue-white game. 5 were on each sideline, and 3 were in each booth. Okay? Well, it turns out they're going to allow 18 active tablets for use in the coaching booth, sideline, and locker room. Tablets, though, cannot be connected to other devices to project larger images and cannot include analytics, data, or data access capability or other communication access. All team personnel will be allowed to view the tablets during the game. So they'll have tablets where they can look at the video, but you can't, for example, I don't know if you ever do this, like take your tablet and mirror it to your TV.
I've done it, yes.
Yeah. Well, you can't do that. So you can't go into the locker room and have this 60-inch TV in there and then mirror the tablet in there and go over it in the locker room. You can't do that. You have to use the tablet to do it. Okay? You can't have the big TV set on the sideline and mirror it to the big TV set there.
I'm trying to look for it, but one of the Western PA high school teams this year actually did that. They were mirroring the tablet onto the TV behind the bench. No, because James Franklin and Terry Smith both told me about it. Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Because they went down there and you couldn't believe it. I mean, the system they had. All right? So that is what they're going to do with technology. Again, green dot sticker on the back of the helmet. So one player defense, one player offense. Of course, we know the one player offense is going to be the quarterback. Turns off in 15 seconds. Now, that doesn't mean you don't signal plays in. That doesn't mean that. Well, you get under 15 seconds and a coach sees something and they say, hey, signal this in, they have to do it. Also, if you're in a hurry-up offense, which means your wide receivers are out, you may have to signal to them what the play is. So signaling is not completely out. It's still going to be used, but the primary communication is going to be verbal, coach direct to quarterback, and direct to, in all likelihood, most times, the middle linebacker. and the 2-minute warning, which is fine. I like the strategy around the 2-minute warning. And also, here's the part it doesn't say, but all the rules that you saw last year in the final 2 minutes of each half, where you can pause the clock on a first down, and I didn't say stop, it said pause. That will now be in effect in the final 2 minutes as well. That stays in there. So a little different timing compared to the rest of the game. Just like last year, but now you have that hard stop at 2 minutes. Okay. We'll see what basketball wants to do next, because this, the even years are the rules years. But that's what they're going to do with that. Something else I wanted to talk about today, and that is how smart you have to be in the movement of players and how you have to do your homework on the movement of players. And I'll give you an example. There's a player by the name of A.J. Store. I've talked about A.J. on the show before. And I've talked about him in glowing terms. I mean, I'm not going to tell you which team I put him on, but I did vote for A.J. Store to be on one of my all Big Ten teams. Because, as I said, he is a guy that was different than everybody else on their team. Completely different than everybody else. And he, because, let's face it, for the most part, Wisconsin basketball, and I say this with all due respect because they win, but they're really a cookie cutter of bang, bang, bang. They have a lot of the same kind of guys. This guy was not one of those guys. Right? But you have to look at a guy's history. So take Store. Grows up in Rockford, Illinois. Okay. So he plays for Kankakee High School in Kankakee. Then his father moves into Las Vegas. He goes to Bishop Gorman. Right? Then he goes to AZ Compass Prep in Chandler, Arizona. And then he goes to IMG Academy. He originally commits to Illinois. A month later, he decommits. He eventually goes to St. John's. Stays at St. John's. Right? Does well. Plays 1 year there. Transfers to Wisconsin. Then surprises some people and transfers again. He goes to Kansas. So it's going to be his third year, third different school. This is after being at 4 different high schools. Now, I realize that you're moving up. I got it. And I can understand, for example, going to an IMG Academy. I get that. I completely get that. I know that Ty Washington was at AZ Compass Prep. I got it. But you sit there, and to me, that's a red flag written all over. Sorry. It just is. 4 high schools? 3 colleges? Do you really think he's staying in Kansas? Really? I see this stuff all the time. I mean, Penn State one time had a player who transferred after 1 year, and you look back on his life, and between junior high and high school, he was at 6 different schools. Well, he ended up playing at 3 different schools in college. I mean, are you really surprised?
I kind of think that comes back a little on the parents as well.
Oh, there's no question. Some of it's him.
Yeah.
Some of it's the parents. I mean, there's no question. There's a lot that, but when you are recruiting a player, you are also recruiting around the family too. You got to be able to look at the family like, okay, like Danny Hurley was on Dan Patrick's show as we carried here on WKOK, and Dan Hurley was talking about recruiting and going to AAU. And he says, you'll watch between 30 and 40 games in a day, whatever the number happens to be. He says, and I'm not only looking at the player, I'm looking at the interaction from the parents in the stands. What's that like? Because you're going to be dealing with the parents too. Right? He said, then I want to see how the player, and this is something I look for when they come around. I mean, it's like, I'll have recruits introduced to me, right? I do not go over and talk to them because you want to know what your place is. If they come over and they want to introduce, fine, okay? And I want to see how they are with their parents. How respectful are they to their parents? Now that's the second part of this. Now, if you got a kid who's like, or just is ignoring what the parents are saying, whatever they're doing, or are they respectful? I'll give you 2 right out of the gate. One's a transfer and one is a 4-year player. Hudson Ward, who just signed with Penn State, comes in with his mom and I think his coach. The second part I'm not sure about, but he's with his mom. I watched him work out and the whole deal. I was like, well, good player. But I watched him with his mom, how respectful he was, how respectful she was. Like, okay, right? Said something to me. Same thing with Kachi Enzi. Both his parents are there. His mom at one point was in journalism because I was talking with her. Mom was in journalism. So we had a nice talk about that. But to see how they treated him, to see the respect with which he treated them, you can look at the athletic ability, but these are a couple of, quote, intangibles that you look at. So you're right. Yeah, do the parents get involved? Sure, of course they do. No question. But to me, this is like red flag stuff. Like, how many high schools? Really? It's a big number. And I think there's a lot in the transfer portal part. There is a lot to look at. A lot to look at. And those happen to be a couple of things right away to look at. You look at a Julian Fleming. He transferred in. He stayed at Ohio State all those years. Okay? It's fine. He did everything he could there. He was loyal. So he transferred. He's going to play well here, too. It's a big plus. I only bring his name up because he's local. And it takes you about 10 seconds to be around Julian Fleming and go, I like this kid. Just as a person.
I mean, it's somebody that's had the spotlight on him since he was in 9th grade. And that's kind of the thing with him is kind of along the lines with LeBron James. There's been plenty of times where he's had a chance to not be a good person, and he's never failed that. He's always made the right choices, and that's tough to do in this day and age.
He's just a good guy to be around. Now, I haven't been around. I haven't met his family, so I have not. Hopefully, at some point, he'll get the opportunity.
You'll like Mick. You'll like his grandpa. Trust me. His grandpa was a long-time girls basketball coach around here.
Oh, great, perfect. But you can just tell that he knows who he is, and he knows how to be a great teammate. Okay. That's exactly the kind of person you want in your program. Pretty simple. And that's what you're looking for. But if I'm looking at somebody that's like, this is the third school, he's gone through 4 high schools, I'm like, well, he doesn't stay in one place ever. Like, I mean, he may be a terrific guy, a terrific player, but I'm not in the mood to rent a guy for a year. You know, I'm talking about a younger player. Older player, yes. Because at that point, hey, look, I need the experience. Like Julian Fleming's coming in. He's got a year. Oh, are you kidding me? Thrilled beyond words he picked that last year to be here. Great. But if I'm looking at younger players, I don't want the one that's jumping around like this. And I know talent is the big part. I got that. You're sitting there as Bill Self in Kansas. A.J. Storr is going to help you. He'll bring talent to the table. No question. But there are some guys that just jump around and they just can't get themselves settled. And you're right. Some of it may be internal pressure, and others just may be the kid.
I think that's partly the portal as well now is, the portal and NIL because, some of these guys are looking for let's be honest, more money.
Well, I mean, I'm sure Kansas is coming up with more money. But I remember Charlie Moore, who was in the backcourt for Miami. They played Penn State in the Jordan Center a year and a half ago. And Isaiah Wong's in the backcourt. And Moore's the point guard. And he's a good player. There's no getting around. He's a good college player. But he began his career at Cal. Then he went to Kansas. Then he went to DePaul. And then he went to Miami. When he played Penn State, he was on his 4th school. And I made some joke in the pregame show. He says, well, at least he's working his way east. I said, I don't know. I said, are there any universities in Ireland? So it's in this jump around portal, right? Looking at the high school background is as important as looking at the college background. If they're in one high school or maybe 2, you got a chance to go to IMG Academy, hey, you got to go, right? So, I mean, that part I get. But if, they're sitting at one high school, right, and then they get into college, and after a couple of years, then they transfer, hey, and that person fits, I'm there. But if I'm looking at somebody that's in 4 high schools, now they've been in 2 colleges, they're going into year 3, do I want that guy? The odds are I'll be replacing him in a year when he's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. If I get the one-time transfer that's the senior last year, I already have plans in place to make sure that scholarship's being used next year. That's the kind of homework you have to do these days. That's why when people ask, oh, look how big the football staff is, this is one of the reasons between recruiting and the portal, you have to have people that are diligent in going through all this stuff. It can't always be the coaches. What, do you want them to work 22 hours in a day? All right. Tim, next half hour, we'll talk about baseball as we continue here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Spring has sprung, and it's time to dust off those insurance policies. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855 or visit our website at purdyinsurance.com to see what we can do for you.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is because it's Brewers Outlet time. The Beverage Supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you and thank you for your years of patronage.